Good day, ma'am. I am Kyla Ayesa Rivera, and today we will be presenting the key components of community-based disaster risk reduction management plan together with CBDRM plan of our chosen municipality. Together with my group mates, Mr. Carl Andre Kilo, Ms. Jonna May Morales, Ms. Katrina Jane Ramirez, and Ms. Alma May Florence Valdez. Let's start first with the definition of CBDRRF. What is community-based disaster risk reduction management? According to United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, CBDRRM is described as action, measures, initiatives, and program aimed at reducing disaster risks that are largely planned by people living in high-risk areas and are based on their immediate needs and capacity. So, ang CBDRRM o Community-Based Disaster Risk Reduction Management ay isang mahalagang uri ng sistema sa panahon ng sakuna, lalo na sa mga lugar na nasa high risk o mataas na posibilidad na maapektuhan ng mga natural na phenomena tulad ng lindol, bagyo o pagbaha. Isa itong paraan upang maiwasan ang malaking pinsala sa buhay, ari-arian, at maisabuhay ng mga tao sa isang komunidad ang kahalagahan ng pagiging handa. Binibigyan diin ang dapat gampanan ng mga mamamayan sa pagpaplano at pagdedesisyon at pagsasakatuparan ng mga gawain na may kaugnayan sa DRRM. Napakahalaga ng aktibong partisipasyon ng mga mamamayan dahil sila ang may mga posibilidad na makaranas ng mga epekto ng sakuna at kalamidad. Sinasagawa ang CBDRRM para maging handa ang isang komunidad at maiwasan ang malawakang pinsala sa buhay ng tao at ng mga ari-arian. Bukod pa sa mga nabanggit, mahalaga ring masuri ang mga estrukturang panlipunan, pang-ekonomiya, at pang-politika na maaaring magpalubha ng mga epekto sa hazard at kalamidad. Ayon sa ulat ng World Health Organization, mahalaga ang pakikilahok ng bawat sektor ng pamayanan upang mabawasan ang epekto ng hazard at kalamidad. Halimbawa ng programa, Flood Early Warning System, at Information Dissemination Network. Importance of CBDRRM. First, empowers the people by recognizing and emphasizing the value of communities and local organizations. Tulad ng sabi ko kanina, mahalaga na gampanan ng mga tao sa komunidad ang pagpaplano, paghahanda, at ang pagpaparticipate sa ganitong gawain dahil tayo din ang may posibilidad na makaranas ng mga sakuna at kalamidad. At makakatulong din ang pagiging aktibo para maging handa at magkaroon ng pagpaplano sa darating na sakuna at kalamidad. Second, creates a resilient community. Ang pagiging aktibo at pagkakaroon ng partisipasyon ay mahalaga at nakakatulong upang magkaroon ng isang matatag na komunidad. Lagi natin tatandaan na malaking tulong sa bawat isa kung magkakaroon ng tamang pagpaplano at magiging handa sa bawat sakuna at kalamidad. Third, promotes the culture of self-help and self-empowerment. Tinuturuan nito ang bawat tao sa komunidad na magkaroon ng sariling pagpaplano sa darating na sakuna na talaga namang makakatulong sa bawat individual, lalo na sa komunidad na nasasakupan. And lastly, reduce the probable impact of hazard events. Ang pagkakaroon ng pagpaplano bago ang sakuna o kalamidad ay napakahalaga at malaki ang tulong na mabawasan ang epekto ng mga kalamidad at sakuna. For example, sa lugar nyo yung pinakasentro ng bagyo. So bago pa mag-landfall, magkakaroon ng paghahanda ang bawat isa. At kung may plano ang isang community like naka-ready na yung mga kinakailangan na gamit, mas mababawasan yung maaaring maging epekto ng bagyo. Kung dati noong hindi pa nakakapagplano, mas malala or mas maraming nasisiraan ng ari-arian. Pero nung nagkaroon ng maayos na pagpaplano, minor na lang yung mga naging epekto ng bagyo. Key components of a community preparedness plan. A. Identification of vulnerable community. This accounts for all communities within the area and their levels of exposure to an identified hazard. So these are the characteristics determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors or processes which increase the susceptibility of an individual, a community, assets, or system to the impact of hazard. In this component, it talks about the levels of exposure of a certain community in a hazard or disaster. For example, the municipality of Cagayan. This city is frequently visited by a typhoon. Hence, we can say that the level of exposure of Cagayan when in terms of typhoon is high. Next reporter, please.
Good day. I'm Carl Andre Esquilo. I will discuss the one of the components in a community profile, which is manpower. So manpower, basically, this are the group of people or stakeholders that will lead or assist people of the community before, during, or after a disaster. First in the list is the search and rescue. This is the personnel appointed by the government to oversee, implement, update, and manage the whole DRRM plan. Since sila nga ang maglilid sa buong plan, kailangan ang mga taong i-appoint dito is knowledgeable and trained enough for them to fully take over and understand the implementation of the DRRM plan. Number two is the rescue team. These are the trained personnel or experts designated to form a team for the following. For the search and rescue, these are trained personnel who are in charge of rescuing or saving people who are in danger during a disaster or any emergency. Ito yung mga tao na kailangan properly trained, physically fit, and of course, knowledgeable since sila ang mangunguna sa pag-locate and save people who are in danger. Next is the medical assistants. These are the group of people composed of healthcare professionals who provide medical services. So ito yung mga nurse or doctors na mag-administer ng mga medicine na kailangan at tutulong na gamutin yung mga injured people during the disaster. So kailangan itong mga taong ito ay trained or licensed medical professionals kasi sila ang mangunguna when it comes to our medical needs. Next is relief distribution. These are the personnel who facilitates fast and efficient distribution of relief goods to the people affected by the calamities, hazard, disaster, and etc. So basically, sila yung nakikita natin na nagde-deliver ng mga basic necessities like food and water to the affected community. Kadalasan yung mga dinidistribute na goods nanggagaling sa government or pwede rin sa mga donations from different private sector or non-government organizations or yung NGOs. Next is the relational connectivity with local authorities, NGOs, and etc. So this connection with certain agencies and institutions which provide aid, facilitate services, and supporting programs related to the implementation, improvement, and enhancement of the DRRM plan. Just like we have mentioned earlier, ang DRRM plan, hindi lang yan nagtatapos sa government. Kailangan lahat ng sectors, the community, and this certain institution, kailangan mag-work hand in hand yung mga yan in order to the success of the implementation of the DRRM plan. Next reporter, please.
Good day, I'm Janemy A. Morales and I will be discussing the physical infrastructure. Physical infrastructure is the identification of both vertical like buildings, poles, and trees, and horizontal infrastructure like road, cable wires, pipes, and bridge, and natural elements that may be affected or can cause disaster from a hazard. So basically, these are the elements exposed and can be damaged whenever a disaster has occurred. These are the factors that may determine the level of a disaster risk of structure. First is age and durability of structure. This refers to how old the structure has been made and its capability to withstand an impact from a disaster. Second is the magnitude of potential hazard. This refers to how strong or how big the impact of the identified hazard. For example, merong typhoon and we have these terminologies like signal number 1, 2, or 3. Once we know how strong the impact of a coming disaster is, we can be able to somehow prepare. Third is the presence of the structure within the vicinity. This is where you assess what are the other structure present in your area. Fourth is the level of material or type of material. For example, we have a bridge. It's important to know what are the material used in the building, like if it's safe or matibay ba ito. Fifth is approximate number of people or vehicle using the structure. For example, in a road, this is where you assess the number of people and vehicle passing by it to know if it's durable or matibay ba. Next is risk assessment. It includes comprehensive and specific discussion on risk assessment, risk reduction, disaster preparedness, and risk management plans before, during, and after the disaster. So this refers to how experts identify the probable risk of community in a certain disaster. And the guiding parameter in assessing the risk are vulnerability of community to the hazard, potential magnitude of the hazard, duration of impact the hazard to the community, causality of effect to exposed elements, reversibility of the potential disaster to the community, and other identified stakeholders. Next is the Early Warning System, or EWS. It is the provision of information about imminent hazard that is likely to affect a community. Basically, these are the warning signs delivered to the people of a community by the government before a disaster. So this may appear in a various form of communication like sounds, symbols, and letters that can be easily understood by the community. For example, is the sound of the siren. We all know that sound of siren is a sign that there is an earthquake. Hence, by this, people will know and will act accordingly to response to the earthquake. So, EWS should be also short, distinct, and clear para nga ma-avoid natin ang any confusion. And most warning system are distinguished through colors. For us, color red is usually the most used color, and we know that this connotes imminent danger. Next, reporter, please.
I'm Almi Florency Valdez, and I'm going to report the emergency response protocol. We have here the search and rescue. The objective of the search and rescue team is to search for and provide immediate aid to the survivors of a disaster. Search and rescue are the ones who are providing the needs of a survivor of disasters. And one important aspect of successful search and rescue operation is that the familiarity of the search and rescue with the location. Because a familiar rescuer may be able to find the missing person because of their knowledge of the site prior to the disaster. And to ensure their safety, rescuers should observe the following. First, wear protective gear at all times. This will be very helpful for the rescuer to be safe at all times while searching for persons who are missing because of the disasters. Second, constantly monitoring for vital signs for them to ensure that the rescuer is in safe and good condition. And last, the contamination of the rescuers and their equipment should be done before leaving the site, because by doing this practice, it will prevent the spread of health hazard or secondary contamination. Aside from search and rescue, emergency response protocol involves the needs of survivors. There are necessary things that survivors need. First, clean and potable water. We know that water is an essential primary need of people because our body needs water to function properly and to prevent dehydration. Second, the ready-to-eat food. We know that the survivors don't have enough tools to cook, and the steps required in food preparation might become too taxing for them. Therefore, we should give or prepare ready-to-eat food like canned foods. Third, huge, secured, and safe evacuation center would be very helpful for the survivors, but there are parameters for it such as the capacity of the building, availability of facilities, area size, and distance from the danger. Fourth, visible, accessible, and equipped healthcare providers. We should expect that this would be included in the needs of survivor, especially for those who have common injuries and medical problems. And last, debriefing or giving sessions to people who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. In addition to that, survival kits and materials are also included in the emergency response protocol. This kit should contain essential items, should be waterproof, and checked regularly, and aside from that, it should be handy during the disaster. These are the following basic but most essential things that should include in the survival kits and materials. First, food. Just like what I've mentioned earlier, water and ready-to-eat foods are very essential for everyone in order to live, especially for the survivors. Number two, medicine. Just the simple medicines. For example, for fever, cough, colds, allergies is just enough to include our survival kits and materials. Number three, first aid. This would be most important thing aside from the food because this can be used if we have a simple injuries. Number four, clothing. For example, are the extra clothes, jackets, underwears, and blankets. And number five, sanitation and toiletries, just like tissues, shampoos, and soaps. Number six, emergency tools. This is very important. It may consist flashlights, batteries, radios, phones, and chargers. Number seven, important items. It includes the keys of our properties like houses and cars. Also, some jewelries and cash. And last, number eight, important documents. These are the papers we kept secured like birth certificate, IDs, passbooks. So they should be placed in waterproof materials like containers or envelopes. Next reporter, please.
Good day, ma'am. I am Katrina Jane T. Ramirez, and I will continue the discussion about the emergency response protocol. So we are now with general evacuation procedures. By definition, general evacuation procedures consist of the general guidelines that need to be remembered and followed in an evacuation. So ito po yung mga kailangan natin na sundin at matandaan when we are experiencing a disaster like typhoon, earthquakes, and etc. And we need to evacuate to somewhere safe and secured places like evacuation centers or facilities. So in general evacuation procedures, we have 6 main guidelines that needs to be remembered. Number 1, be aware of the emergency exits and warning calls of the buildings you frequently go to. Kinakailangan na fully aware tayo at knowledgeable sa mga emergency exits sa mga places na kadalasan nating pinupuntahan. For example, nag-work tayo sa isang building. Kailangan may knowledge tayo about the exits of the building para kung may disaster man na mag-occur, alam natin kung saan tayo pupunta. Number 2, when emergency alarms are sounded, keep calm and try to keep others calm too. During a disaster, we must practice and act as calm as possible. In that way, mas matutulungan din natin yung iba na maging kalmado rin. Number 3, exit the building using the stairwells. Never use the elevator. So as we all know, and we are discussing it a million times, never use the elevator when there is an emergency. Kasi there might be a chance that the elevator might not function and wala ka ng choice kasi stuck ka na sa loob and there is no way out. Kaya as much as possible, use the stairways when evacuating. Number 4, if there is a DRRM personnel directing people on what to do, follow his or her instructions. As we had discussed earlier, yung DRRM may mga inappoint yan ng mga personnel na mag-lead sa atin kung meron mang sakuna. And for us, people of the community, our role is to follow their instructions. Number 5, once in the assembly area, notify authorities of people who need assistance. So if we are already in a safe area at kung may makita tayo na kakaroon ng difficulty or need ng assistance, notify agad natin ng mga personnels para magbigyan ito ng tulong. And number 6, never re-enter the building unless it has been declared safe by the authorities. This is the most important among all the guidelines. Never ever go back to places where disaster has occurred and it has not been declared by the authorities safe. Kasi there's a high chance na kapag bumalik ka, pwede ka pang masaktan or pwede ka pang ma-injured. As we all know, ang pinaka-iniiwasan sa evacuation ay ang pagdagdag pa ng number of people injured or being harmed. Next is with the recovery plans. So this is the process of gradually restoring the community to return to its pre-disaster level of functioning. So dito, unti-unti nang binabalik sa old lifestyle yung community, like rehabilitation of livelihood, restoration of social and economic activities, advancement in development projects, and reconstruction of shelters and infrastructures. So basically, itong recovery plans na ito, it aimed to give the community the assurance that after a disaster, wala silang aalalahanin kasi because the government have this kind of plans which helps the community to rise again. And lastly is the community disaster reduction fund. It is important to develop a comprehensive DRRM plan to estimate and allocate funds for the implementation of the plan before, during, and after a disaster. Here, this is where the government lists down all the estimated expenses that will help the community to prepare from a disaster. Dito, kasama dito if magko-conduct ng programs, seminars, or activities for the preparation of a disaster, dito ilalagay kung ilan ba ang estimated fund na ma-allocate sa programs, trainings, or seminars na yon. So if you have also recovery plans, we need a fund to implement or conduct these plans. Ganon din during a disaster, kailangan natin ng fund or budget para sa mga necessities na kailangan during a disaster like medicines, transportation, and etc. Furthermore, in this regard, responsible management and utilization of funds are strictly exercised. And here is my Ms. Kyle Ayasa Rivera for the presentation of our Community-Based Disaster Risk Reduction Management or CBDRRM plan.
Here is the Community Disaster Risk Reduction Management Plan of Municipality of Llanera. Let's start with the community profile. The municipality of Llanera lies in the heart of Nueva Ecija and is bounded on the north by the city of San Jose, on the south by the city of Cabanatuan, on the east by the municipality of Rizal and General Natividad, and on the west by the Science City of Muñoz and the municipality of Talavera. The 22 barangay within the municipality are A. Bonifacio Norte, A. Bonifacio Sur, Bagong Bayan, Bosque, Caridad Norte, Caridad Sur, Casile, Florida Blanca, General Luna, General Ricarte, Gomez, Inanama, Ligaya, Mabini, Morcon, Plaridel, San Felipe, San Nicolas, Santa Barbara, San Vicente, Victoria, and Villa Viniegas. Llanera has a total land area of 11,373.56 hectares, allotted to the following land uses. Build-up areas comprising residential, commercial, institutional, road network, agricultural lands composed of irrigated and non-irrigated, vegetable area, wetlands, and other uses. Identification of vulnerable community. Llanera is basically landlocked municipality, though there are small bodies of water like rivers and creeks and irrigation canal. Typhoon. The province of Nueva Ecija is frequently visited by typhoons. The most destructive ones that hit the province left the municipality of Llanera with destroyed palay and vegetable. The strong winds destroyed not only the crops, but the houses of other small buildings as well. Next reporter, please.
In manpower, we have the following people. For risk assessment expert, we have LDRRM officer, Mr. Walter C. Solis, LDRRM assistant, Ms. Jomari R. Pabalate, and Mr. Delfin Tomas. For rescue team, we have Mr. Adriano Aresena, Mr. Jaime S. Pabalate Sr., Mr. Rick A. Caralde, Mr. Eduardo Francisco, and Mr. Marvin Salanga. For medical assistance, we have Dr. Maylin N. Villarosa, Ms. Catherine Junio, and Ms. Cynthia Garcia. For relief distribution, we have Ms. Amerja Louis A. Vidal and Mr. Rodolfo de la Cruz. Next reporter, please.
For physical infrastructure, the municipality has a total of 201.73 kilometer of road network and 146 linear meter of bridges, total of 31, that are in good condition and passable to all type of vehicle. Transport bus facility. There are varying modes of transport in the municipality, making it convenient for commuters to travel within the area and to adjacent cities and municipalities. Jeepneys are available for long distance route, while tricycle is the mode of transport for short distance or within the locality. For power, electrical power is supplied by the NECO in some part of the municipality, while the northernmost part is supplied by the Sahelco. Water sources. The municipality of Llanera is a rural community where underground water is not thoroughly exposed or subjected to chemical and waste seepage. Therefore, potable water supply in the town is generated mainly from underground source by the use of hand pumps and jetmatic pumps. There's still a few families relying on open well for their water supply, and a relatively small percentage being serviced by the Llanera Waterworks. For risk assessment, before a typhoon, a rising feeling of fear and anxiety among individuals, families, and community, disaster risk rating is low, risk management plans is dissemination of information on the nature of the calamity, causes and prevention, and other precautionary measures. During the typhoon, massive damage to lives, properties due to flooding and extreme winds. Disaster risk rating is high. Risk management plan is conduct rescue, evacuation, and recovery operation as necessary. After a typhoon, damaged cable wires, felled poles and trees, and affect to economic sources. Disaster risk rating is medium. Risk management plan is provision of restoration and rehabilitation assistance. For early warning system. Before a typhoon, dissemination and communication, we have an EWS of household warning, telephone, radio, and TV. During a typhoon, monitoring and warning, we have an EWS of river level, warning decision, and rainfall. After a typhoon response capability, we have an EWS of evacuation center, search and rescue, and relief good. Next reporter, please.
Emergency Response Protocol. Letter A, Search and Rescue. Number 1, conduct rescue and recovery operation to the disaster-stricken areas with coordination. Number 2, conduct evacuation of disaster victims and bring them to pre-designated evacuation center and safer and/or higher grounds. Number 3, assemble pick-up points and staging area. Number 4, alert transportation unit and other equipment for deployment. Number 5, assist the organization and training of barangay response and rescue teams. Letter B, needs of survivors. Number 1, preposition or stockpile of medicines or medical supplies at the municipal health office or rural health unit. Number 2, alert government and private hospital and medical practitioners for possible assistance in respective localities. Number 3, establish medical clinics in the evacuation centers. Number 4, maintain health sanitation in the affected areas and evacuation centers. Number 6, institute preventive and curative measures to check and control the spread of disease. Number 7, provide food, beverage, water, shelter to the survivors during disasters. And last, number 8, coordinate and supervise all government or non-government entities providing health services and various evacuation center. Letter C, survival kits and materials. Number 1, storing of non-perishable foods and waters per persons in the households. Number 2, provide first aid assistance to every household such as medicines, bandage strips, elastic bandages, enrolled gauze, and etc. Number 3, on standby battery-powered, solar-powered, or hand-crank radio and flashlight and/or candles and waterproof matches. Number 4, stockpile of things for shelters like tents and blankets and/or for sanitation and hygiene like toiletries, alcohol, and sanitary napkins. Next reporter, please.
For general evacuation procedures, number 1, secure all the personnel within the area and assist them to the designated evacuation facilities. Number 2, assist first all the persons with disability, children, and senior citizens from evacuating. Number 3, provide transportation facilities and other equipment for use during the rescue, relief, and evacuation operations. And number 4, ensure availability of all needed transport facilities in coordination with Llanera Jeepney Operator and Driver Association or LIAHODA and private sectors. For recovery plans, conduct post-disaster needs assessment. Number 2, see to it that affected areas are no longer dangerous to evacuees prior to their return, and conduct a damage assessment on local or government-owned facilities, buildings and infrastructures, agriculture like crops, livestock, fisheries, and link damage assessment information to reconstruction and rehabilitation efforts. For the Community Disaster Reduction Fund, we have letter A, Disaster Mitigation and Prevention. Number 1, Flood Mitigation and Prevention Program. We have an allocated fund of 100,000 pesos. Installation and maintenance of drainage system and waterways. We have an allocated fund of 3 million pesos. For letter B, Disaster Preparedness. Stockpiling of relief goods and foods and goods. We have an allocated fund of 200,000 pesos. Information, education campaign, and other communication supplies. We have an allocated fund of 1,500,000 pesos. Installation of early warning signs and other supplies and other materials. We have an allocated fund of 100,000 pesos. And pre-disaster trainings and seminars, we have an allocated fund of 200,000 pesos. For the letter C, or the disaster response, we have evacuation center and emergency operation center supplies and materials. We have an allocated fund of 602,097 pesos 56 centavos. Personal protective equipment for calamities, materials, and supplies. We have an allocated fund of 100,000 pesos. And rescue ambulance expenses and maintenance, search and rescue equipment, supplies, and materials. We have an allocated fund of 200,000 pesos. And the disaster preparedness funds have a 70%, which is equivalent to 7,202,097 pesos. For letter D, or the disaster rehabilitation and recovery, we have a quick response fund of 30%, which is equivalent to 3,086,613 pesos 24 centavos. And the total community disaster reduction fund is 9,008,710 pesos 8 centavos. And that concludes our presentation. We also want to give thanks and credits to the municipality of Llanera for answering our inquiries in relation to the creation of this CBDRRM plan. Thank you for listening.